There's one nursery that are way ahead of the curve when it comes to producing drought-resilient plants. And we caught up with them as they were getting ready for the show.
We're in one of the driest spots of the country here in Hertfordshire, so we have for the past 20 years been growing plants suitable for those conditions. My name is Annie Godfrey, and this is Daisy Roots Nursery, which I run with my partner Steve Machin, and help from our three little vermin controllers, Ivy, Mabel and Violet. We grow a mix of perennials and ornamental grasses for every situation, but what we're really specialists in is drought-tolerant perennials. Drought-tolerant plants are those plants that have evolved a whole series of different adaptations that help them cope with prolonged dry periods. One of the important things about the choice of plants here is that they need to be hardy. All of our stock overwinters outside. Things really do have to fend for themselves. This year I've produced somewhere in the region of about 6,500 plants from seed just out of a 13 by 9 greenhouse. And it's my greatest joy to spend hours down there with a good podcast, just pricking out like mad and looking out on the garden beyond. Good points to make about establishing drought-tolerant plants is to not feed them when you put them in the ground. These are generally plants that come from dry, arid, poor soils, and if you feed them, then they grow very lush and floppy, and they need more moisture than if you don't. You want a tough, low-growing, hardy plant that's not going to be all succulent and attracting pests and disease. But one of the key things when you're growing plants in a drier climate is to understand a bit about the adaptations they have made to cope with that dry climate. Right in front of me here we've got a sedum. Sedums have really succulent leaves. When water's available to the sedum, it has cells that expand and soak up that water. Also here we've got Stachys byzantina, the lamb's ear plant. Now the way this copes with dry conditions is the whole leaf is covered in this really lovely, soft, furry blanket which insulates it and cuts down on the amount of wind sucking moisture from the surface of the leaf. It also has a low growth habit. Low cushioning plants have much less profile that catches the wind when it's a hot, sunny, dry day. And another adaptation to dry conditions is bulb formation. Crocus and allium and tulips come from really quite hot, dry climates. And this allows them to actually come into flower when there's moisture available early on in the season. And then as the ground dries out, they become dormant and just end up as underground storage organs until moisture is available to them the following year. And one of the other adaptations is huge root systems that some plants, like this Verbena bonariensis, produce to cope with drought. So in terms of watering on the nursery, this is one of the quickest plants to dry out because in the ground it produces this huge, very fine fibrous root system. And in a pot, it just can't do that. So that means that it flags quite early on in the day, even though it's one of the most drought-tolerant plants. So it just goes to show that the plants spend millennia adapting to the conditions that they grow in naturally, but not necessarily to the ones we're trying to force them to be in. It's mind-blowing, all the different little nuances that these plants have that help them cope. Even if we don't want more water, we can help improve the soil. We can add humus to the soil in the form of leaf matter or mushroom compost. For drought-tolerant plants, I would stay away from manure because that's too rich. We can mulch as well, that helps a lot. We can use bark, we can use gravel. Sand beds are a new phase, so sand drains very well, but it's only the top bit that dries out on a hot day. The sand below retains moisture. So our display at Hampton Court will be a pretty herbaceous border, a mix of perennials and grasses. And one of the prime candidates at the moment is this Anthemis E.C. Buxton. And this will hopefully in a couple of weeks be a mass of lovely lemon yellow daisies. Really fresh, sort of marguerite looking plant, but a hardy candidate for any border and copes with drought once it's established. So another plant we intend to use is this little guy. This is Catenacci caerulea, and this grows in dry Mediterranean meadows. That sort of papery encasing stops the buds from drying out before these beautiful blue flowers open. One of the nicest things about doing displays at flower shows is the enjoyment of the people gasping and saying, oh, that's lovely, and all the photographs they take so that they can go home and recreate something similar themselves.
Annie, a gold medal.
Very pleased, Adam. Couldn't be happier.
I'm really not surprised. And it looks like everything you were hoping has made it.
Yeah, it did. It's all here and looking fantastic.
It is. But what really excites you about coming and putting one of these together?
I love the combinations. I love loading the van and putting a plant down next to another plant, and colours pick up on other colours, and you think, oh yeah, that's going to look great in the display.
I mean, it's lovely though. You've the Sanguisaurus picked up in the throat of the digitalis.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
At the same time, you're creating a rhythm that keeps us moving.
Absolutely.
And also, I love the fact that you make your plants work hard. You're a little bit tough.
Yeah, absolutely.
It means they're going to be happier in the garden.
Treat them mean, keep them keen.
Exactly. But if I was going to ask you one thing that could make gardening just a little bit easier, what would it be?
Research your plants and find out where in the world they're native to, because then you can picture in your head the conditions that are perfect for them and replicate them in the garden. Yeah. Plants like this little Linaria triornithophora, that's from Morocco. Yeah. So it's going to love sun, it's going to want a well-drained soil, and it's going to cope with drought. No problem.
Simple.
Plants like the Catenacci there, that's a northern Mediterranean grassland plant, so thin, poor grassland, again, sunny spot, poor, thin soils, perfectly happy.
Yeah, and I'm looking at that yarrow, the Achillea.
Yep.
You know, it's growing really well in my lawn, and that's not in the best place at the moment. You know, it tells you, doesn't it?
Yeah,
it tells
absolutely.
You.
Yeah.
Oh, it's brilliant. It really is.
You're welcome. Thank you.